subcommittee to order. Will the clerk please call the roll? Here.
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 Thank you. We also have with us this evening Councilor Rita Mercier, Councilor William Samaras, and Eric Slagle, who's the Director of Development Services for the city. Thank you for being here. We will open up the subcommittee to the public as well later on this evening, but let me just read the meeting notice. City Council Zoning Subcommittee will meet at 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, May 6, 2014, in the Council Chambers, City Hall, to discuss an ordinance amending the code of the City of Lowell, Massachusetts, respect to Chapter 290 thereof entitled Zoning by extending the traditional mixed-use zoning district to include all parcels located in Lowell with frontage on the northerly side of Rogers Street, as well as the entirety of 39 Whitehead Avenue, 550 Douglas Road, and 458 Wentworth Avenue in Lowell, all of which are presently zoned regional retail. The public is invited to attend. With that, I will open the meeting up. The last time we met, I believe, was February 25th. There was a meeting scheduled back the previous city council, I believe it was December 17th, and did not happen due to a snowstorm that evening. We did meet February 25th. We took testimony from a number of the property owners during that time. We also heard from the city administration through Eric Slagle. So we're here tonight to continue the discussions and to really try to move this forward. This has been going on now through 2 city council bodies, and we really want to try to come to some decision and some closure. So with that, I'll open it up to the members of the subcommittee if they have any comments or questions, and then we can open it up to the public. Any of my colleagues have?
Well, I guess the 2 things that probably should be considered. One would be, I think, a recommendation informally from Councilor Leahy, I believe, which would only extend the mixed-use district as far as Parkview Avenue. And then the second consideration would be to just change the existing district to prohibit retail above 10,000 square feet and to require planning board approval for drive-throughs. But I think with that, what we would want to do is take a look at other districts in the city that are zoned for regional retail and see if we were going to negatively impact those by doing that. So let me just throw those out for discussion.
And thank you, Councilor Kennedy. Councilor Belanger?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's a very good start. It helps, and the word we ended off, much we heard over and over the last meeting, was compromise, where the residents are protected. But, please keep in mind, as, this board represents businesses too. And we have to come to a middle ground for everybody that's happy. And but these 2 recommendations I like. I think it's a good start. And but nonetheless, still much work needs to be done from here. So I look forward to both sides of the dialogue this evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing this evening is for us to bring to the floor a discussion about amending what we currently have before us and having the traditional mixed use begin basically at Shed Park and go down to Parkview Avenue on both sides of the street, thereby eliminating the discussion that we had of the properties that would be on I guess it would be on the southerly side of Rogers Street, as well as the northerly side of Rogers Street from Douglas Road to Parkview Avenue, to eliminate those properties from the discussion of the transitional mixed use. Now, the transitional mixed use, if you all recall, is a brand-new zone that would have to be drafted by the city, by the law department, and then brought back forward. What is being suggested tonight is that we discuss for consideration doing a traditional mixed use from the Shed Park area down to Parkview Avenue, or, as Councilor Kennedy mentioned, look at the regional retail and amend that zone to for this particular area to have drive-throughs, be special permit, and to have the buildings no larger than 10,000 square feet. Again, suggestions that we'd like to at least bring forward, 2 suggestions that the subcommittee would like to bring forward for consideration. So I guess with that, I don't know if Mr. Slagle wants to weigh in, or do you want to open it up for the public at this particular, Mr. Slagle?
I just wanted to maybe throw up, just for discussion purposes, these are the, some of the slides that were prepared for the last meeting. And the area that's highlighted, this is the old zoning for that district. This is the current zoning. And right now, the proposal was to take, the original proposal was to take from Douglas Road and Phoenix Ave, all of the regional retail going west, and turn that into TMU. And we did have the memo that was prepared by DPD, by Adam Backey, to talk about a new zone, creating a new zone to create some sort of transition. What I'm hearing now is that we're talking about maybe having a new zone for transition, but shrinking it down. According to my map, that would likely encompass the properties at 572, 590, and 600 Roger Street on the north side, and then 581 and 500 on the southern side. That includes, the 500 is the nursing home.
Nursing home.
And so, I just wanted to put that up just so everybody can see what we're talking about, the districts that would be encompassed in that. I think it probably makes sense to open it up.
Okay, thank you. Before I do that, Council Kennedy?
Yeah, just for clarification, I think maybe we're talking about three separate things, three options. And one option would be that we leave the district alone, but change the regional retail district so that in order to put a drive-through in, you would need planning board approval. In order to put retail, and you would not be able to put any type of retail that had a gross building area of larger than 10,000 square feet. That would be one option to do. The second option would be, and I think this was suggested by Council Lee, although I probably shouldn't be giving him credit without speaking to him first, but I'm pretty sure that he did. Anyways, the second option would be that we would extend the mixed-use district, but only as far as Parkview on both sides of the street. So we'd stop at Parkview, and we'd be doing nothing to change anything beyond that, going out towards Tewksbury. And then the third option would be what we've discussed in the past, would be creating a new district, but I'm not sure that the Division Planning Development has done any work really on what that new district would look like and what would be allowed and so forth. So, but nevertheless, I think those are three separate options, and I think the first two are a lot easier than the third one. So, Mr. Chairman, I would be in favor of opening it up to the people that are here.
Okay, thank you, Council Kennedy. That being said, I would invite the public to approach the podium, and if you want to address the subcommittee, please state your name and your address for the record. Thank you. Welcome, Attorney Plunkett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, David Plunkett from 151 Warren Street in Lowell, represents Sage Bank. As we've indicated in the past, Sage is the owner of the parcel that's on the corner of Phoenix Avenue and Rogers Street. Of the proposals you're discussing here tonight, clearly from the perspective of the bank, the proposals that leave the current zoning in existence for their parcel would be preferable to them. Again, as stated in the past, I think it's very important to, not for repetition, but to just reference the, when you're looking at this from a perspective of planning and the initial acquisition decision and development of that site, this parcel, given and understanding the feeling of neighborhood saying, okay, impacting us, but looking at this specific area that you've got, the light industrial land behind it, you've got, the gas station to the side, you've got the restaurant to the other side. So it's really not something that achieves what would seem to be the goal of the committee, to try to address the concerns of the neighborhood, because anything that's going on that site really would not have an impact on the neighborhood. But conversely, trying to do something to, in trying to affect a blanket approach to address some of their concerns, could have significant negative impact on the bank and their investment there. So, it's a situation that when we're looking at this, one of the things that we looked at in the previous hearings that, it's not just the designation of the area, but going through all the use charts, and there's signage requirements, height requirements. You have to go through every single one of those use, every single potential use. And then there are numerous things that you might not think might be impacted, but when you look at the column and the TMU as opposed to the RR, there are significant changes, and those significant changes have a negative impact upon businesses. And, so this is a situation where, from the perspective of, a very good neighbor in the city of Lowell and cognizant of their, their community responsibilities and really work at being a member of the community, being proud to be a member of the Lowell community. Our request would be to look at this from the perspective of true planning perspective as to the goals you're trying to achieve, what you want to achieve, and how, extending that to an area that's in this specific location with the light industrial and down that Phoenix Avenue. That's a very heavily traveled area going back into that light industrial avenue. So, some of the initial discussion back with the original forums, and say, well, you might be able to get some, residential use that you don't have now as a trade-off. But the reality is, you probably don't want residential use there, because again, from a planning perspective, the last thing you want to do is to create zones where the potential for conflict, the tension between the two adjoining zones is increased. And anything that you do to introduce a potential residential use abutting a light industrial use, I would suggest actually is detrimental to planning perspective in that you're creating the potential for a greater tension between the two adjoining parcels. So thank you very much, though. We appreciate the ability to, in the invitation to take part of this and be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Plunkett. Good evening. Attorney Theodoro, welcome.
Attorney George Theodoro, 133 Market Street. I represent POTUS Stylis Hill on 683 Roger Street. It is the last residential home on this strip, and my client has lived there with their family for 50 years. Next to us is a law office, Brian Barry's law office. Across the street is Milan's Pizza. Next door is Sage Bank. The prior neighbors of my client, the Scotts, they sold their property to Sage Bank many years ago and enjoyed a substantial profit because of the zoning that exists right there. And Sage Bank was able to develop, and they're very good neighbors to us. The point that I'm trying to make, it's difficult, it's to place us in a defensive position to have to defend the existing zoning. I don't think is fair when right now there's really no compelling reason to change the zoning. Now, obviously, we would agree with your second provision is to keep the zoning the same in that area, but at the same time, I want to impress upon you that it's important to protect the interests of the commercial property owners along Roger Street. The commercial property owners pay the substantial and bulk of the taxes in this city. Now, it is important, and I'm not derogating the arguments of the neighborhood organization there. They've worked hard in this and have interests that they wish to protect too. But in this case, I think we really have to pay attention to the commercial property owners there and the defensive position that they've been placed in here to come up through no reason of their own to defend their position. Now, My client would like to keep the zoning as it is because we have substantial property rights that we enjoy by having an RR zone there. And if it is changed, we would be hurt. We'd be financially hurt. Now, I know there've been arguments in the past in talking about changing this, and we've heard talked about it's revenue neutral. Well, I disagree with that. We'd ask you to keep the zoning the same, not to make any change, and not to place us in a defensive position where, we have to keep coming back here to the board. And I thank you for letting me have an opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, Attorney Theodoro. Anyone else like to speak? Good evening, Mr. Barrett.
Yeah, I live at 39 Whitehead Ave, and I own Kilkenny Pub at 660 Rogers Street. Both parcels are in the zone that they're proposing to change. And as I stated, prior times or whatever, I think for my situation, it's best to leave it the way it is. And I don't really know how it's going to benefit the city. And if the other side is out, it seems the neighbors' biggest concerns is, the drive-throughs and the traffic. If you're going to be able to develop the other side, I really don't understand how, how that's going to help out. So I'd ask, if anything, if you could leave it the way it is for the time being. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Barrett.
Hi, I'm Celine Lehman. I live at 213 Parkview Avenue. And
Welcome.
I guess what I'd like to say is that we've been talking about this issue for a long time. I think it is very important to talk about compromise, but I would ask you to consider what compromises the business owners have been willing to make. I think the residential property owners have willingly taken pieces of the property out. I think we've talked about, is traditional mixed use right? Should be there a different zone? How should we address the issues of other people? I do believe that the people who've been willing to compromise are the residents. I think we've lost the original perspective that the reason this came up at all, and I know people are tired of the Taco Bell story, but we felt defensive about that. We didn't want to have something that would be open until 4 o'clock in the morning, have that kind of traffic on the street, have to draw people off of 495 at hours of the night that I don't particularly think is a good idea for that area. I think the idea of having a Taco Bell as people drive off of 495 into the city of Lowell is the wrong message to send to what the city of Lowell is all about. There was an interesting article in the Sun on Sunday about the image of Lowell and what we want to project as people come into the city. I thought it was an interesting perspective on what we might do off of the Lowell Connector and Thorndike Street. I feel the same way here. People are coming, it's an entrance way, it's a gateway into the city. And I believe in the business owners that we have there. I think a lot of the businesses that I partake in are smaller. They're more regionally owned. They're not nationally owned. It is more in the whole notion of a neighborhood. And I think we've lost a little bit of the history that has gone on this topic, because a lot of the history took place on the planning board, and we have a new city council. I just ask you to consider some of the history and how we got here. I'm perfectly happy to compromise. I think that's what everyone has to do. I think it's a good idea. But I want to make it clear, I haven't seen any compromise yet from the business owners, and I think that's important to do. I'm concerned about the traffic on that street. I drive on that street several times a day. The block that we're talking about not including now from Parkview Avenue to Douglas is where we go from 4 lanes to 2 lanes. There are lots of people that drive on that street that don't understand that's what's happening. So there's vying for who gets to go. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize this was going down to 2 lanes. The signage isn't good, so you can't tell it's going down into 2 lanes. I now do my best to go off of Douglas and back another direction. I try not to go down Parkview Avenue and turn onto Rogers Street. That's not an easy street for me to access at this point. There's so much traffic on that street. And That's my neighborhood, and I do not own property on that street, and I respect the people who do, and I think we need to come up with a way to make our best compromise. I thought what we were doing was talking about changing the zoning. If that's not the case, that's okay. I just didn't understand that that was going to be changed here. So I wanted to bring my perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Evening. My name is Steve Gendron. I live at 20 Clock Road in Lowell. So I think there is a compelling reason to change the zone. And I think it became apparent during the discussions we had about Taco Bell, and that's what started this whole thing about 2 years ago now. And it's been, and you know, in the city's master plan, it says the city council is responsible for changing zoning if it's appropriate. Changing zoning to protect neighborhoods. What we found out during that Taco Bell incident or that discussion is that this zone is incorrect. This zone should never have been regional retail. The lots are too small, it's too tightly intertwined with the residential property, and the road's too narrow. What we found out in that Taco Bell discussion is that the trucks that were going to have to make deliveries to the Taco Bell couldn't make a right-hand turn into the property coming off the highway, so they were going to have to come down Andover Street and through the neighborhood to get into the property. What does that tell you? It tells you that it shouldn't be regional retail. Those properties should not be regional retail. The TMU zone allows all of the businesses that are running there now to continue running the way they're running. And that's what everybody wants, is those businesses to continue running the way they're running. Additionally, it takes the residential properties there and brings them into code. I think it's the perfect solution. There's already been a compromise from the neighborhood on this. The neighborhood has already reduced the size of the area that they were, originally brought forward to the planning board. The neighborhood said, yeah, we'll go along with a new zone. But the business owners just come up here and said, we're not interested in any change at all. So there's no compromise happening here. I think you should move the question. Okay, this has been going on too long. The numbers are dwindling. People are getting tired of this. People are frustrated. People in the neighborhood who I've talked to about this have told me they're just frustrated and disgusted with their government because this has been, just kind of batted around. Nobody wants to take a stand. I got to give Mayor Elliott credit. In the very first meeting that this came forward, he's the only one that stood up and said, I'm ready to vote tonight. I support the neighbors. I'm ready to vote tonight. I say, you have a proposal before you right now. TMU, move it down, took the light industrial abutting properties out. Move the question. Up or down? It doesn't, I don't think anybody even cares anymore. Everybody's so tired of this issue. We want, move that question up or down, and then if need be, there can be a secondary effort that says, okay, maybe we tweak the regional retail. Or maybe we shorten the zone. But I say, well, let's bring it to a vote. Let's get everybody an opportunity to say, yes, I support it or I don't, and this is why, and we'll go from there. Because, no more meetings. I mean, I don't know how many times people can come up here and say the same things over and over again, and we just kind of, vacillate. Let's take a vote.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gendron.
Lisa Kukos, 93 Dinsmore Street, Lowell, Massachusetts. Good evening. I feel like I'm on the defensive, which I shouldn't feel like that. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Everybody's very tired of this issue back and forth. Only question I have, 22 years, working on one business, paying commercial regional retail since day one. Why we have to change now? You say we need a compromise. It's myself, my husband, that's getting punished, and my neighbors on the street because of the Taco Bell issue. If that wasn't the right fit, you guys took care of it at that time. I don't feel as though we have to change the zoning now. If the issue can get resolved on the way that it is, the zoning that we have. One thing my husband asked me to say, because he's shy, he's an immigrant of his English, but he said to the board, if it was your property, would you feel as though it's right now to change the zoning for the future? We're going to lose quite a bit of money, too, if we sell our property in the future. I'm not a lawyer, as you can see. I'm not as eloquent as the other people that come up. But I do know we care about the community. I live in Belvedere. I was raised in Lowell. My parents were also immigrants. We work very hard. This is our retirement. And I don't think it's fair now to change everything that we've had up until now. Sorry it came out like that, but that's it from me. Sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Coffey?
Good evening. I'm here asking that the zoning be changed, the TMU be extended. I have been working on this for a long time. I've been dealing with the property along Rogers Street for a long time as an abutter. And the general plan here, the general idea is that we want the neighborhood to be a neighborhood. We have a very good map over here showing the proposed zoning, but I have another map here to share with you. You don't have to see all the details. It's in 3 colors. Green is public use, blue is where people live, and orange is the other stuff. All right? You all remember from when you were taking history in school about gerrymander? Look at that. Look at that little piece of orange. Is that not a gerrymander? That's wrong. That doesn't make sense. It never did. It's time to fix it. That's what we really need. What's going on here is that all the business, nobody is affected immediately by this. The question is, why is there opposition? There's opposition over what might or might not happen down the line. There's opposition over whether or not the businesses that depended on this neighborhood can do a number on the neighborhood on their way out. That's what this is really all about. We hear from the bank. A bank is supposed to be a stable institution. What are they in here for? This, by the way, the bank is an important thing in Lowell that took Lowell out of its name. You know, where are these people coming from? Zoning is supposed to help us. It's supposed to keep neighbors, abutters, in a situation where nobody is hurting the other, where everyone can use their property for what it's intended for in the first place, which was, if you go back and see what was there over time, was always neighborhood businesses. Why it was ever the predecessor to regional retail, B2 there or whatever it was, is unclear. Why it's regional retail now is unclear. It's something that needs to be fixed so that the zones of the city support the life of the city, that we have buffers, that we have residential zones, we have business zones, we have regional retail zones that make sense. It's time to make this make sense. Please, let's get this fixed now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. I'm Ellen Collins, 212 Parkview Avenue, Lowell, Mass. I'm here to speak in favor of doing something to fix the zoning. Primarily, well, a bunch of different reasons. The traffic situation is beyond belief. I don't use Rogers Street because, you know, it's a waste of time, basically, other than to go to, you know, those businesses such as like Belvedere Florist, where we do business. yet I'm in favor of all of the neighborhood businesses being able to continue the way they are. And I understand that, you know, the TMU zone would permit that. The traffic situation is beyond belief. I heard from one of my neighbors at church on Saturday that, you know, the status of the zoning on Rogers Street has been at issue since about the late 1950s. There's, you know, a long history of, my neighbor has lived in his house, which is a beautiful house, since 1953. And he owns a substantial amount of land. I came here tonight thinking that we were going to talk about the transitional retail district that the prior assistant city manager had proposed. I was very surprised to hear new proposals, especially when Mr. Bakey's memo was distributed with the notice to extend the TMU. And the notice to extend the TMU talks about the compromise proposal that I think we were dealing with back in November. It's not notice of, any of the other proposals that you put forward at the beginning of the meeting. So I have an issue with that. I'd like the notices of the meetings to give proper notice of what's being discussed. The other concern that I have is, and I guess I disagree with what Council for Sage Banks said, that construction, let's back up. Immediately behind, or I guess it would be behind what used to be the Beacon Crest and now is the Wingate, are part of the Lowell wetlands. And during the spring thaw and the rainstorm that followed swiftly upon it, there was a major flood at the tail end of Wentworth Avenue behind Wingate. And the Lowell Sun has pictures of a woman on Wentworth Avenue, basically standing on her front steps with, barrels, her, recycling bin or barrel floating along. Development in that area has to be monitored because for instance, immediately behind Sage Bank, the Steelos property and all of the other properties on that side of Rogers Street, you have, wetlands, and, the wetlands are part of the Trullbrook tributary, which I understand, the FEMA firm floodplains have changed, and the floodplain for the piece of land behind the property is going to be amended, and the zoning ordinance amended to incorporate that change tonight. And I understand the reason for that was, in order to comply with FEMA's requirements. So, development along Rogers Street, to the extent that it landfill occurs, backs up the water in the Trollbrook tributary upstream, which, goes along behind at the end of Wentworth Avenue, Berkeley Avenue, toward Boylston Street. So even though those people aren't here, their risk of flooding will increase, if, large parking lots are put in there. And so, I would ask that, the zoning be fixed to suit the characteristics of the neighborhood and the land. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Actually, I would just like to add that, I'm sorry, that the wetlands, of course, are subject to the Wetlands Protection Act. And so any construction that takes place has to, and I believe the state enforces that and not the city. So, keep that in mind.
Thank you. Point taken. Thank you. Attorney Barrett?
Thank you. Martha Barrett, 287 Appleton Street, Lowell, Mass. Here this evening, I represent Sam, the owner of Milan's Pizza, and he also owns another property on Roger Street as well. He certainly wants it to remain as regional retail. If the city did choose that it needs to be a compromise, it's still unclear as to specifically what the compromise would be. There's a lot of ambiguities that would need to be determined before he would be willing, or I would advise him to compromise. At this point, he wants it to remain as regional retail, and I think that his businesses are best suited for regional retail. Also, for he and other business owners, this has been on our minds since only last Memorial Day. We didn't know about anything until it's coming up on a year. I know it was before the planning board and before the residents that had concerns of Taco Bell for a long time previous, but to us, it's only been about a year. And we may be tired, but we certainly want the best results for everyone. And at this point, it should remain as regional retail. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Barrett. Anyone else? If my colleagues would permit, I'd just like to get into the record. I did receive a communication from Attorney Brian Barry, and I'll just summarize. He wants to go on record as being opposed to the suggested zoning change for Rogers Street. As you know, my law office has been situated at 671, 673 Rogers Street for the past 20 years, and it's abutted by two similar houses. All of the property to the rear is industrially zoned, and just to paraphrase, he just wants to go on record as being opposed to the zoning change from RR to TMU. Mr. Stylos, Dr. Stylos?
Morning, councilors. Good morning. Good afternoon. Feels like morning. Louis Stylos, 24 Holyrood Avenue, Lowell. I'm also the son of Mrs. Stylos, who is at 683 Rogers Street. I just want to point out, because I think all the issues are being covered from both sides, what I would suggest is that there are safeguards that have already worked and are in place. And the other thing that I would say is that if you change the zoning, you may not be able to do projects that would be even better than what people are considering. And what I mean by that is that if you limit the ability of projects to be put forth because you are now closing down potentials that are going to make projects that are going to need to prove themselves. And those projects, any of the ones that they're more concerned about, sound like ones that would require a lot of vetting through permitting processes that are already in place. And I think that, it should be, the point should be made that, the process has worked. If there's a project that the neighborhood doesn't want to support or want to have go through, they've already shown that they can stop that. No company will want to locate in a place that they're not wanted, and that's what happened in a previous instance. So if there's a right project out there that may not even get off the maps because you've made a change, that hasn't been really expressed by anybody that I've heard through all these discussions. So I would ask you to remember that there's a process already in place. It has worked. If there is a project that is going to be acceptable to the neighborhood, that will get done, and it will be vetted very, very thoroughly. If it's a process that, if it's a project that isn't going to do it, the neighborhood is shown that they're going to come out and oppose that, or create things that will make it acceptable to them. So I do think that that aspect, from a taxpayer standpoint now, there may be some project that has not been conceived of, and there are no projects, as far as I'm aware of, that are before this. This is a what-if situation. And I would tell you that there's a lot of ability to decide what's going to go in there with what's already in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Stiles. Anyone else? Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The traffic on Rogers Street has been bad for more than 30 years. And anything that we do this evening or that the council does on a recommendation of this subcommittee is not going to change that traffic. 30 years ago, people were talking about how bad the traffic was on Rogers Street, and that situation has changed. And it's very hard to do anything to improve it because the only way to do that would be to widen the street, and to widen the street would mean takings, which would be an expensive proposition. I think that I saw taking the retail regional district and having it be that there would be no retail larger than 10,000 square feet, and that any drive-through would require planning board approval as a compromise. A compromise because the people that live in the district or that have property in the district would be able to maintain their same district. But what I've heard from the neighborhoods, the neighbors on Parkview Ave, is they don't want big box retail and they don't want a drive-through. So it seems to me that what that does is that's an easy fix. It preserves the neighborhood from the drive-through and from big box retail, but at the same time allows the people that own the property to maintain their district. That I saw as one compromise, but apparently nobody really thinks that's a good idea. The second one was that the district be extended as far as Parkview Ave. And I don't know that it really needs to be extended further because you have a natural boundary, which would be Whitehead Ave and Allen Street. The zoning or any development isn't going to jump those streets. And so those streets provide a buffer for the rest of the neighborhood. The only place where there isn't the buffer would be between Wentworth Avenue and Parkview. And so to extend the district down to Parkview would do that, although I would suggest that if there wasn't, even without doing that, if we were talking about extending that district back into that residential area, there'd be 100 people down here instead of a handful of people talking about this. No matter how tired everybody was, they just would be there. That's just the way that it would be if you tried to do that in that neighborhood. That was the second compromise. Both of those I saw as compromise solutions to the problem that would alleviate the fears that the neighbors have, but allow the people that own property in the district to keep their district. The third option, which is what Adam Bakey was talking about, was not really extending the district, but creating a new district that would be a transitional or a buffer district. And so I guess that's maybe that's what we're left with, is doing that. But I don't see that district before us, so I don't know how we end up taking a vote on that this evening, Mr. Chairman. And that's kind of the way I see it. I mean, I would like for this to end as much as anybody else would, and I'd like it to end in a way that was going to have everybody smiling on their way out of here. But if we don't have that district before us, I don't know how we end up voting on that this evening.
Thank you. Councilor Belanger?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's funny, you can see tonight the frustration on both sides of this. I know it's been a long process for all of you, but please keep in mind this is our only second meeting on this current subcommittee. So please We see your concerns, and I think we have a good understanding on them. But this, Roger Street is more commonly known as Route 38, okay? Next to Thorndike Street, it's probably our most traveled artery in and out of the city. It's a very, very busy street. It always has, and it always will. Okay? Now, just for an example, if you start at Kittredge Park and you go up to Route 38 all the way to Route 128, which I've done, it is very, very heavily developed. When you go through Tewksbury, you'll see the Tewksbury Country Club. There'll be strip mall behind strip malls. Wilmington, there's a practice skating rink where the Boston Bruins practice. And Woburn, it just gets overwhelmingly over. I'm not saying this is what I want to see, but I'm just saying Route 30, an artery like this, it's really essentially highly residential, considering the thoroughfare that it is. And I will fight to keep it that way. I am not saying I want to be like these abutting towns, but I'm just making a point that it's very, very developed as you go further south towards Boston. But we're here more or less of a petition, when I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals, of a Taco Bell that wanted to put in a drive-through. They withdrew the petition because of you. The neighbors came out in droves, opposed the project, they withdrew, they wanted no part of it, of anything that the community wasn't behind. So there are, as one of the speakers have mentioned, there are already protective measures in place. There's the planning board and the zoning board that look out for you. Okay, I'll give you an example. Many years ago, Hogan Tire, right across from Kilkenny Pub, wanted a digital reader board sign. And they just wanted something, nothing spectacular, but something that gives 4 tires, $99, whatever it may be. And their argument was, well, there's one down the street. And, and Hogan Tire does a great job there. It's a very respectful business. It's always kept up. And we had to say, we're sorry, Mr. Hogan. It's case-by-case basis. Route 38 bottlenecks there. We feel it's unsafe. If people are looking up at the sign, they won't see the traffic in front of them. We had to deny Mr. Hogan, and that was unfortunate. So it's case-by-case basis. There are protective measures in place for the neighborhood. But as Councilor Kennedy stated, look, I'm trying to get a resolution here as soon as possible. I have a lot of experience to bring to the table from being on the ZBA prior to being here, and I like to reach a compromise as soon as possible. And that's what you're looking for. I'll be straight up with you. I do not support converting this to a TMU. I do not. I think it can remain a regional retail for the reasons these businesses here, and they feel they're here because their back is against the wall for no reason. And they have a solid argument. They've been doing what they've been doing for 10, 20, 30 years, and why do we have to change? And they have a good argument. I don't think anybody can disagree with that. I would like to see it remain regional retail, tweak it, and put the protective measures in place, such as Councilor Kennedy mentioned, no box retail over 10,000 square feet. Any drive-through will need planning and zoning approval. I think we can tweak it where the businesses can remain in harmony and the neighborhood is protected at the same time. And that will take a short amount of time rather than drawing up a whole new district. I mean, you think it's been a long time now. You're talking probably another year and a half, 2 years. And no one wants to wait that long. So I think we can tweak the regional retail in a short amount of time and come within a compromise within months and end this thing. And that's the way I'd like to go about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Belanger. Mr. Slagle?
Yeah, I just wanted to raise a couple of points. I believe Councilor Belanger has effectively said one of them, which is that for a drive-through, there already exists board review in the regional retail district. It's already required to be reviewed by the boards. They need relief from a board to put in a drive-through, even at this point.
By the planning board?
Yes.
That's required for the regional, okay.
Yeah, it's required in any district to get a drive-through.
Okay.
I would be hesitant to put a restriction on retail over 10,000 in the regional retail district, because the way our zoning is set up, the regional retail district is supposed to be our most permissive retail district. It's the district that the Target and the Lowe's, I mean, that's the district that where if we're going to have large retail, and 10,000 square feet is actually, not a huge amount, but to have large retail, that is the district that it's appropriate for. That's why it was designed that way. So I would be hesitant to put in a blanket restriction. Right now, to get a project over 10,000 square feet, it already requires board review. You have to go to the planning board if you have a project over 10,000 square feet. But I would be hesitant to suggest to the council that they ban it altogether. I just think that's.
Well, the depth isn't there, Eric, and essentially to have something that large, quite frankly.
I agree. I don't think they could get it in here. I don't think they could get it to the planning board in these lots anyway. But as a blanket thing for the regional retail across the city, I don't think a ban on lots or on projects over 10,000 square feet
That is a
would be
concern.
appropriate.
You have a good point.
I'm going to recognize Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Attorney Slagle here. Right now, tonight, we're discussing Rogers Street from 39 Whitehead Avenue, 550 Douglas Road, and 458 Wentworth Avenue, and that particular area of the stretch of Rogers Street, right?
That's a portion, that's the district we were
So,
discussing.
in my understanding, we narrowed it down to just that certain area, right? What I want to know is, when we started out all those times ago for the first time, it was a very long area of Rogers Street, wasn't it? What was it? Do you have that in front of you?
I do. It was from Douglas Road. If I can approach just a minute.
Douglas Road, yes. That's all right, go ahead.
Originally, it was from Douglas Road.
Right.
All the properties on this side of Douglas Road up to where it is TMU, and then originally it was all properties on the southern side of Rogers Street all the way down to Phoenix.
So from Douglas Road to Phoenix Avenue, right?
From Douglas and Phoenix all the way up to where it's TMU now. That was originally.
Wait a minute, what's one end to the other end? What is it?
It's Douglas and Phoenix, and then it's just past Wentworth, the property just past.
To Wentworth, right?
Correct.
And people were upset about that, and they came down here and they spoke and they said, we're not supporting that. And then we came back to the table and narrowed it down smaller, right?
I think the compromise proposal was to take the property south of Rogers Street, you know where the nursing home is? Everything east of the nursing home, south of Rogers Street, was removed from the proposed district change.
Well, those people are happy that it was removed, but these people are not. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair. I agree with former city councilor and present school committee man Steve Gendron. I think it's unfair to belabor this issue any further. I'm willing to vote, and I am willing to leave it RR the way that it is. I'm not in favor of this compromise, although I do like to compromise. I think the compromise would be from the businesses if we stripped it away from them and put this new zone on and said, you know, you paid for all these years a particular commercial rate, but you know what? We're going to switch it now. And I would have a problem with that if there were not measures in place that would safeguard things to come in and just overturn neighborhoods and leave drive-throughs. But as you can clearly see, there was no zoning change when Taco Bell came in. Through the efforts of the very people that want the change are the people that got the change because safeguards were in place to give a hint to the business owner that, gee, they're not happy. I'm not gonna do it. I'm backing out of it. So we know that there are safeguards in place. So the purpose has, the process has already worked, and it has been shown. And so I'm not for changing it any further. If we do vote tonight, I'm voting to leave it as it is. That's what I say. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
That's how I
Councilor
feel.
Samaras?
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for coming down to state their issues. But I think there are two issues here. One, what the people here tonight are requesting, that things are basically left the same. because what they're feeling is if we go into a transitional zone, what the values will be is, in a sense, hearsay, or they just don't know what it will be. But I also remember first coming on board that when Adam Backey spoke about these issues, and he talked about the third plan, I thought he said more about that third plan, that it should be a complete plan for the city. In other words, if there was any change going to be made here, in this area here, it would be something that would have to be considered citywide. In other words, that the city would set up, what is our mission, what's our goal? Councilor Belanger talked about the number of cars. That's not going to change, correct? I mean, unless we come up with a whole new highway system. Those things aren't going to change. So is it possible to consider voting for this package at this particular time to support the people who are here and who are worried about their businesses, but to consider the plan that Adam Backey stated, that there should be a complete review for the entire city on where we want to go with this?
Right. I think if I could, that kind of picks up on what school committee,
Point.
what Mr. Genron said about, let's take a vote tonight, and then going forward, if we want to tweak the zoning code and make some changes and bring it back in more of a comprehensive approach. So, again, I'd be prepared to, to vote this evening. I don't know what the wish of the subcommittee is. Councilor Kennedy?
Can I just get a clarification? So what you're saying is that the way the regional retail is now, that in order to put a drive-through in there, you need a special permit?
You need to get review from the planning board, yeah.
Not a special permit, just site plan review?
You have to get a special permit and site plan review.
Both. And in order to put in retail greater than 10,000 square feet, you need a special permit?
No, you need site plan review. But that's any project over 10,000 square feet, anywhere in the city, you need to have site plan review for over 10,000 square feet.
Okay.
Mr. Gendry, did you want to?
I just wanted to say, if the compromises that Mr. Kennedy, Councilor Kennedy, put on the table tonight are realistic compromises, the entire neighborhood group isn't here tonight. This is the first time anybody heard about them, so maybe it makes sense to get their input on that, if it's truly a realistic approach, before, in spite of the fact that I just said we should push this to a vote. I was a little frustrated, I know, but I would feel if it were going to be tonight and all those people are not here, and those compromises are realistic, then maybe it makes sense to run that by the entire group. And I might suggest that if there were going to be another meeting on this, maybe we could do it in a little less formal setting, where maybe we could sit around a table with a map and talk about it. Just my suggestion.
Okay, thank you. What's the wish of the subcommittee? We're approaching 6:30. Councilor Belanger?
I think it's a good, I think School Committee Member Gendron's got a great idea, getting it back to the neighborhood group. Let's reconvene one more time here, or with, maybe the planning and development can show up at the neighborhood group meeting, and the subcommittee iron a few things out to bring back here for the next meeting. I think that's a great idea, rather than vote hastily tonight. I think emotions are really taking over tonight, so let's take a breath and sit one more time. We're already come this long. What's another month or so? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would second Councilor Belanger's motion to meet one more time, and then that's it, and then make a decision then.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Roll call?
Chairman Milonazo.
Yes.
Councilor Belanger.
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yes.
3 yeas.
Thank you. Motion to recess the subcommittee meeting, and we'll reconvene.
So, second.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.